Welcome or welcome back to the Nature Journal Educators Forum. It's Yvea Moore here. Jack is still in Africa, so I'll be leading this forum and then the next two before August we take off. So this should be a really awesome workshop today we have with grant writing. I would like to introduce everybody to our special guest today. This is, I don't know if she's on this side for your screen or on this side for your screen, but this is Kay Hones. Um, she is a teacher librarian and has been for many years in different school districts. I personally know her as my foster guardian growing up. And if you've ever looked at my bookshelves and been like, wow, Yvea's got a lot of books, they're hers. They're actually her books. They're all her books. And she's the one who I credit with making me realize that the outdoors could be for me too by having books about a diversity of different kids from all over the world enjoying the outdoors. So I credit Kay with that. Kay is also a very veteran grant writer in the sense that she's been doing that for a long time. But I would like to give Kay a chance to introduce herself. So hi, Kay, how are you?
Hey, how you doing? They're not all my books. I know,
Okay, true.
they're
But a lot of
all
them.
mass amount of books. Yeah, my name is Kay Hones. I'm originally from Michigan. You all know how to do this for Michigan. And I've lived in several places, and I started grant writing when I lived in Mississippi. I worked for a program at the University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg, and the person that coordinated the program had me help on a federal grant they were writing to support the program, and it was to provide uh, professional development for preschools and early education programs in southern Mississippi. So that was my first learning about grants and how to write them. And I've only done a couple of the big grants like that, and it's always been in conjunction with other people. But once I came here to San Francisco, I started doing some grants, and as a librarian, and I would encourage all of you to look into librarians or make a friend with a librarian. There's lots and lots and lots of grants available through the ALA, American Library Association. And if you're in another country, I'm sure you have similar programs. For instance, there's Bookapalooza, which you can write, and then the librarians review books all year long. And then these books are divided up. And if you write the grant, and you're chosen because of the type of school that you're at, the need for books, you get 50 boxes of books. What's not to like? And so I've been writing grants for quite a while. One of the other things I really enjoy doing is writing grants with students, especially the high school students that I worked with, and they really had some interesting ideas for grants. So, and okay, I'll go on later. Yvea, what did you want me to do now?
Well, before we get into the grants, could you explain a little bit about what exactly you do or what you did as a teacher librarian? Like, what does that mean?
Everything.
Does it
I
mean just books?
I pushed books, but I also had they call it STEAM now, uh, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. But it's hands-on projects with kids. A lot of them with building little robots, doing things like that. I'm not into AI yet. I want to learn it, but I haven't done that yet. Having every month having a theme, like we would have poetry month, where the kids would create their favorites were candy poetry, of course. And every month they'd have a different theme to focus on, either cultural events or like this month is, what is this month? Um, I think it's bee month for bumblebees, and having outreach to community programs and authors. Local authors are really wonderful. Community programs, and I would encourage people to look into this for for the schools or for your organization. Yvette told me some of you are working with senior organizations and that sort, and special populations organizations. Here in the Bay Area, they have Wild Care, which is rescue for little wild animals that have been hit by a car or something. And they have a program where they come out and visit your school or your site and bring actual um, taxidermy animals to show the audience. And then they talk about, the kinds of things that California animals go through, living next to humans. And then there's an organization for Planet B, BEE, which they'll come out. Oh my God, they brought a beehive out one time, and they do all kinds of interactive projects with the kids. The zoo might have a Zoomobile. It just depends on what you're looking for, and then look for those organizations within your community. And I usually say, "Can you come for free?" And usually they say yes. So always try to get it free. But author programs too, and what you can do is you can do grants to get author programs, but a lot of times local authors will come for free too.
So how does one go about finding grants? And then how does one go about writing them?
Oh, you want to find them first? No, okay. All right. I would start differently. I would say, what do you want? And then that would lead into how you find the grants. Now, again, my background is in libraries, so I'm going to say, if you're in a school, work with the librarian. If you're in a public school, right away, I'm going to tell you about a grant in the United States that everybody can get if they're a public school educator. Um, but if you are in other organizations, I would say talk to the school librarian if that seems like a appropriate. But I would say go to the public library because they're going to, if they don't know, they're going to find out. That's what librarians do. It's not like, oh, we know everything. It's now, oh, you want to find out that? Well, let's look it up and see what we can find. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a grant that's tied to libraries at all. And I'll talk about a couple after this. But I think that there's also sometimes there's a, a, a foundation. And I was lucky here in San Francisco. I knew the person that was the head of the foundation, so I was able to get some resources and information from them. Sometimes there's a fee. I would not pay the fee if you can help it. But I think there's a lot of things online. So like Yvea mentioned that people worked with seniors. And so right away I looked up grants for senior programs, and I found one that's in Canada, and Yvea is going to put that link in. So I don't know how, I would have to do more research, but that's just, what you can do too. But I would say check with the library, check with your local government organization, maybe City Hall. They may have a program there that helps with community resources, community funding, that sort of thing, and just keep asking around and see who has you know somebody's got to have some money. But basically, that would be how I would start to look for grants.
I'm seeing
So
a question in the chat about, is there a grant for a homeschool science group?
I will look after I get through talking about this. I will look because I know there are a lot of STEAM grants. Uh, I I'm not sure. I'll have to look, but I bet there are. And that's the other thing. If you're in a homeschool program, you probably have a community of other homeschool people, then I would reach out to them too. Because I think sometimes we think, oh, I don't know where to go. But if you already have an organization or a group or a community, I would ask everybody, well, I'm really looking for some science resources. Do you have any suggestions? And then should I write a grant? And there may be some really I know there's some really wonderful online, just, I don't know what you would want for the science group, but there's online interactive programs that I'd have to look them up, but I know there's quite a few really interesting programs that are free. And again, through the public library, you can probably find okay, here in California, there are all these resources that they're free through the public library. And so all of our schools have access to these different programs, a literacy, online interactive programs. So I know I'm saying library too much, but I would check with them too and see what they have. And a lot of times they have outreach to the homeschool community too.
Some I'm seeing another question in the chat before we get on to the 5 strategies for writing successful grants. Um, Sarah's saying, I find the idea of writing a grant really intimidating. I wonder if there is some way to access old grant proposals that were accepted so that we can get an idea of what's expected.
You know, a lot of the programs publish at least a brief paragraph about recent winners or former winners. So that would be one way to do it. And I think the way to look at grant writing is say it's like a grocery list. Okay, what do I need? Make that list and then think about where can I find that? And sometimes you can find it for free. Okay, Yvea, if I get off topic too much, you stop me, but there's programs here. One is called SCRAP, SCRAP in San Francisco. There's RAFT, RAFT in San Jose. And you can look, and I'm more familiar with it. Other parts of the United States, there are these programs too. What they do is companies and tech places, they give stuff that they don't want. It could be paper, it could be uh, as simple as that. It could be more complex resources that you might use for science and things. Really, really inexpensive, sometimes for free. So, there's just a lot of things that you can find. And but I would say grant writing it's not that hard, but it just takes a lot of thinking.
So, speaking of that, what are some strategies that you recommend for successful writing of grants?
Okay, well, this is one I always say, and usually when I present this to a group, they always say, "What?" I say, "What do you want? Start with what your budget is." So, as a, a school librarian, maybe I'll say, "I want to get some robots. I want to get some books on robots. I would like to get some materials to build the robots." And I look it up how much those things will cost. Like I'll say, well, I want to spend, $100 on the robots and maybe $50 on the books. Okay, now I know what I'm looking for. Then I can think about, okay, if I have that budget, then I can think about what I really need. If I start out by, saying, some idea of a program without the budget, the budget could get way too big. So I start with a budget and think about the cost. That is this reasonable? Am I getting a good price for whatever it is I'm asking for? Uh, and for the nature program, okay, I'll mention this. I I just before COVID started, about the semester before COVID started, I had written a grant for chickens. I had a teacher that he had chickens, he knew how to deal with chickens, and he wanted to have chickens I worked with a school the students were predominantly high school students coming out of juvenile hall, and he wanted them to have this experience with chickens. So I looked up chicken stuff. I looked up how much a hutch would be, how much food would be, how much a little heater to keep those little chicken eggs warm, all those sorts of things. And I talked to him, is this what we need? And then I wrote the grant and I said I wanted 5,000. And the grant was 5 to 20,000. They liked my grant so much they gave me 20,000. So then I had to think, what am I going to spend the rest of it at? No, I didn't. I already had a plan, but I didn't think I'd get the 20,000. So I think that it's really important, like if you're doing something with nature, if you want to have the kids build little hummingbird houses or little bird feeders, that sort of thing. You think about what can you get? Like for the bird feeders, you can get the milk cartons, but what's the other stuff you need? You need the food. You may need some poles to put the bird feeders on, that sort of thing. We had school community gardens, and so a lot of times they would say to me, we want this, we want that. And then, once I had the idea of what they wanted, I researched what I could get. And then the different grants that I found, if I had the right kind of money for that grant. So after you figure out your budget, you use what you know. So you think about, why is it important? Who will it benefit? What are some specific objectives? How will the results be measured? So with the uh, chickens, who would benefit would be these students that, I mean, they literally had never been around live chickens before. And I have these delightful pictures of them holding the chicken in their hands. It's just wonderful. They built the hutch from scratch. They came to me and they said, that feed is what those chickens like. Can you get us some more? I mean, and I wrote that up, that it will benefit these students that have not had this experience. It'll give them, life lessons. It'll give them ideas to how they can take care of have empathy and take care of these chickens. And it was just an amazing project. And the benefit for the kids, I was able to say I would give the information back to the grant writer, the grant program, and taking quotes from the kids, that sort of thing. And I put that in the grant, that I would get quotes, I would have photographs, I would have a timeline of what we did with the chickens. The number 3, follow the rules. If they say it's due at a certain time, make sure you got it in on time. If they say we want 500 words and that's it, stick to that. Be very, very, very careful about following whatever the rules are of the grant. And then number 4, don't be afraid to shine. Let people know how this is going to benefit you and your program. And, really, quotes are great. A timeline is great. Talk about your program a little bit. I always started out with that, a little bit about the program, and then how it's going to benefit your program. And then last, build on success. Once you get one, you just have to tweak it a little bit. You can turn it in and get another one. So that's basically the background of writing grants. And I think we put it in a link in of the 5. And you can find a lot of articles that have a lot of good information about grant writing, to be clear, to be concise. But I think it's really important to talk about your program and how this will benefit your program, how this is the next best step for your program, to have a community garden, to have a beehive, to have, let me see, we got, what are those things? Yvea, what are those?
Uh,
We, you name it, we got it.
wait, what was the thing that you got?
We had compost bins.
Mm.
Yeah. So, I mean, anything you think of that your program needs, you're going to find great information. You're going to share that information and build a beautiful picture for them to, when they read it. It's not so much, I know facts are important and data is important, but that visual picture, when I wrote about the school that had the kids from juvenile hall, I said 2 blocks from City Hall, our school garden is 5 raised bins. Right away, you have a picture. You're in the middle of the city. You got the raised bins, and then I went on with what I wanted. So I think I think visual clear is really important. Thank you.
Thank you,
Can I,
Kay.
can I talk about some different grants now?
You can, but before you do, I just wanted to see if anybody has any questions so far. Any questions?
Okay.
Not seeing any yet. Go ahead and talk about some different grants if you like. Yeah.
Okay. I did want to mention one other thing because I know it's an international community. I belong to the International Association of School Librarians. So there you go. Um, and they may have some resources. Again, I feel local libraries, school libraries, and then local community organizations are the places to go for that. But one I want to mention really strongly is called Donors Choose. And I think I've got given the link to Yvea. This is for public school educators. You can be the counselor, you can be the social worker, the teacher, the librarian, whoever you are as an educator. And Donors Choose, I've worked with them for a long time. And I even had for a couple years, I had the high school students writing grants with me. And it's really, really a wonderful program because you can get, again, almost anything. And so you start out with uh, what you want and why you want it briefly. And then you list the things that you want. It could be from Amazon. They've got a lot of different vendors that they work with. And then you describe really concisely. My middle school students need gardening tools for our community, our school garden. They will use the hoe and the uh, compost bin and this and that as they're working in the garden. We're going to grow, and then you name what it is you're going to grow, and then we will share it with the students or share it with the families, that sort of thing. Thank you very much. Boom, you're done. So you've given a short overview, you've listed what you want, then you write a description of how specifically those specific tools will be used by those students. I suggest people make the first grant around 100, 150, not more than that, because you want to make sure that you can spread the word and get it funded. A lot of times the Donors Choose, they have a double. So if the beginning of the school year is a good time to write a grant, because a lot of times if you ask for a certain amount in the grant, like $150, everybody that gives like $50 or $20, that's doubled. So you only really need half the money. So that's what I would look for. Sometimes they have special programs, like it'll be sports related, it might be science related, which the gardening community can come in on any science related. And sometimes it'll be for underrepresented students. There's a lot of different categories sometimes that they have special programs because different organizations have put funding in so they can have this match program. And I would say always the beginning of the school year is fine. I remember one year, every grant in California got funded like in September. So it's just, once you get on the site and start looking around, you'll see some of these things. But again, I would say start small. Like you have to spend at least 100. But after that, you could, if you have a community that's very supportive, that's great. Sometimes it's people you don't even know. They just say, "Oh, I like this. I like the idea of this." And so again, really, really can focus in on what it is your program needs. And I had kids write lots of grants. They were just incredible. Another one, I think I mentioned the American Library Association already, but I want to say again, it is for libraries, but if you have a contact with school librarian, maybe they could help. And there's a lot of different grants there. So some of them are more available, they're not just books, okay? The other one that I put in was for, there's a California School Retired Teachers, and they have these little tiny $100 grants. Well, who's going to sneeze at $100? But there may be those kinds of programs in every state. I'm not as familiar with them. I just kind of found out about this one and started doing it. You can do it once a year or so. But that would be, I would look into the teacher programs in the state, the retired teacher programs. And I think that there's just, you just never know. And when Yvea said to mention how to do the research, um, when I said before, I put in uh, about teachers or senior grants for senior programs. And then there was a whole list of things. Maybe the first 5 or 6 had nothing to do with anything, but I did put in a link for the one Canadian one that sounded good. And like I said, I haven't really gone through it real thoroughly. That's the other thing, is just really read through stuff carefully. Oh, the other thing, the National Education Association, NEA, has a magazine that comes out, I don't know, every month, every couple months. And usually on one of the back pages, they have a list of all the different grants that are available. So again, you may, if you're in a senior program, there may be some kind of senior organizations that have uh, would have ideas for grants too. But I think whatever organizational area you're in, check and see what they have, what kinds of resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. Um, I was thinking we could see if anybody's got questions. I see that there's one question in the chat, and then after that, if folks would like, other folks here can share their experiences with grants as well. Um, One of the questions in the chat is, how would you ask for a co-op shared materials for students if you don't have a set number of students?
How many kids do you have?
Um, 54 interest. Okay, the answer is 54 interested, but she's sure that we would break out into smaller groups. I don't think more than 30 for each co-op.
I go for the however many the number of kids. I volunteer at a school now that supposedly has about 65 students. And some days they have 25. So I would go with the top number that you think either that you have registered or that you normally feel that you would service, and then talk about how that you're going to work in groups, because that's an interesting, that this group will do these particular activities and share with the rest of the program, or these groups will be the leaders for this and share with others, that sort of thing. But then you describe your program, and then I would say I would go with the top number.
Um, Thank you. Are there any other questions that folks have? Looking to see, and I'm not seeing anybody raising their hands. Thank you so much for sharing your tips and for sharing your links about where you can go. It's really helpful to talk about this.
Okay,
Um,
I'll look up the homeschool thing and put it in the link.
awesome. Thanks, Kay.
You're welcome.
So, did anybody else want to share about your own experiences as writing grants or getting accepted grants, or what kind of grants you find? I saw that there were some links being put into the chat that looked really interesting. So, yeah, did anybody want to share? Go for it, Star.
Yeah, I've done quite a bit of grant writing, and one of the things that I think is most important, I've written grants and I've also reviewed grants, and so maybe the most important thing is to know what is being looked for by whatever agency you're approaching or foundation. And I when I was writing, I would take the call for proposals and make a checklist for myself and just very methodically make sure I answered every single question and dealt with every, I mean, there are things that they don't want to. So you try to read carefully for those things. what they're looking. They have a pot of money. They want to give it away, but they have ideas about where they want to give it. So you're trying to match yourself with that. And so looking for, and it may change your program. It may change. You may start out thinking, oh, I want, I worked with immigrants. So um, I knew that they wanted to fund for language translations. And so it did shape my proposal, but it allowed me to increase staff. It allowed me to have a couple $100,000 to spend on translating materials, getting translators to go into homes with me in lots of languages. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is it's really important to know what you want and need, but also what they are looking for, because you want to match yourself with what they're looking for, if it's possible. And if it's not possible, it's not the right source of funds for you. And then do everything really well. And Kay was right about the reporting back out about your program, about even if things don't go well, to document it really carefully, because you might want to go back to that source again. They gave you money once, you might want to go back again. And if you're going to go back again, you're going to have a lot more success if they like the way you communicated with the first proposal. It's really, I think it's not hard so much as it's quite tedious. It takes a lot of attention and a lot of attention to detail. It's not rocket science. So, and it's worth the hunt. There are funds out there. So good luck to everybody. It's a very happy day when a grant comes through.
Thank you so much, Star. That is super helpful, especially hearing from your perspective as one who has reviewed grants as well, to like match yourself. And then if it's not a match, then it's just not a match. You find something else that matches more.
It can be quite ruthless. If you're sitting there and you have a stack of requests, so maybe you asked for a 1 year budget in it. So you go through, and if there's not a 1 year, you don't even read the grant. They didn't qualify, they didn't give you what you want. And it people aren't being nasty about it. It's just, they got a pile in front of them. They're going to go and look for what they're looking for. So yeah, it's so important to respond to that call in very specific terms.
That's really helpful to know. Thank you, Star. Does anybody else either want to respond to what Star or Kay said, or have experiences of their own? I'm seeing you, Tara. Here, let me bring you on.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Star, great to see you again. And yeah, I will start so I've also been on both sides of this equation. And I will absolutely echo that, like, finding the right fit between the foundation or the funder and your specific project is like the number one most important thing. And I mentioned it in the chat, but I also want to give it a shout out in my out loud voice, which is a lot of foundations or granting organizations will let you have a phone call or a Zoom call with their program officer. That's the person who coordinates the grant program, or someone on their board or whatever. And like, if you have an opportunity to do that, do it. And like, don't be shy about asking if you can, because that saves everyone the wasted time. If it turns out that, they're actually really specific and they only fund in this one county, and even though you're in the county next door, they just won't fund you, right? Or maybe it's for any of the reasons that a foundation has for wanting or not wanting to fund someone. And sometimes that stuff is either buried on their website, it's not articulated on the website. There's no really good way to know until you reach out and you say, hey, could we have a little chat? And some foundations don't do it, and then they'll say no. you can't have a chat, and that's okay too. But I would always, always recommend, especially if you are requesting funds from someone for the first time. Like Star said, once you have a relationship with a funder, it goes a little bit easier, but that first round is always worth asking if you can have a chat. Um, and I'll also say too that if you're going after the like the larger the the like umbrella of the grant funding opportunity, the more people are going to be competing for the funds. And so if you can find either like like a county Rotary Club or a someone who really wants to fund nature journaling, and that's what you do. Like the more specific and smaller like focus you can get, that's a direct overlap for your program, the better bet it's going to be. And often those smaller ones are a little bit less intimidating because it's true. If you've ever applied for federal funding, you know that it's like a catastrophe. And I basically don't work on federal grants anymore because they stress me out so much. But it's like literally hundreds and hundreds of pages of documentation, and you have to match these requirements and check those boxes. And like there are organizations that exist just to help people apply for federal funding. That's how bad it is. And so if you start there, you're going to be like, this is completely overwhelming and I hate this. And because it's federal level, the competition for those funds is very high. Whereas if it's just your local Rotary or whatever, you write a couple sentences about your program, you give them a budget that's 4 lines long, and they vote on it at their next meeting, and it feels like a much easier on-ramp into the world of grant funding. And then once you've had a couple of those under your belt, you can kind of move up in the scale of grant funding. And that's also really valuable because often the bigger funders like to see who else is funding you, who else has given you a grant. And so then you can say, hey, we've gotten this, 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 and this from our locals, and now we're bumping up to regional. So like stair stepping your way up to the big messy ones is definitely what I would recommend starting with locals.
That is an awesome tip, both about starting with your locals and then also about the phone call. I didn't know that you could do that. And it sounds like the worst thing that can happen is they say, no, no phone call. That's the worst that can happen. It's more likely you're going to get a yes. So that is super helpful. And I'm seeing that Star had something to add. And then also I saw a couple of more questions. Go for it, Star.
Yeah, I this is just a little thing, but I have found it helpful. You'll have a draft of this um, and really try to do a professional job, have it really, you'd be amazed at what people turn in. Sometimes it's pretty shoddy. So that can work against you pretty fast. So just try to present it really as beautifully as you can. But but what I wanted before that, when you got a draft, give it to somebody who's not in your field, like somebody totally who doesn't know the lingo at all, because they will tell you, I don't understand what this means. And even though you're writing for people in your field, it's still, I think it's a really good idea because somebody outside will tell you when you're not being clear. I think it's been helpful for me.
And I'll add, you're not necessarily always writing for someone in your field. Sometimes the review committee is like the board of directors who have all kinds of backgrounds.
This is
So
true.
yeah, Star, that's a
This
great
is
point
true.
to have someone else give it a once over to make sure that you're not using any weird like acronyms or what.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or leaving something out,
Yeah, some
that you
important
just think everybody
context.
knows.
Right.
But of course they know that. Well, maybe not.
Those are also some really awesome tips about handing it to somebody else to look over first, in or out of your field. I know that Kate will sometimes have me look over some of her proposals as well. Um, and so that, yeah, and then that way, if you're somebody who also is is learning how to write them yourself, then by looking over somebody else's, it might also give you your own ideas about how you can do this, about how a grant could look. So that's another benefit. So maybe make grant buddies where you can swap grants and like help each other out. That I'm a huge fan of teamwork. Um, awesome tips from both Star and from Tara. Um, any other any responses folks want to make to that before I bring up the questions on the chat? Just want to make sure I'm not overlooking anybody. So we've got a couple of questions in the chat. One of them, Lisa is asking if there would be a specific grant for field trips for homeschool groups. And so it sounds like it might be good. Like it might, if nobody knows of it, then we might do some research and see if we can find, by looking up something with those search terms and seeing if we can find some ideas for that grant. And then another question, and I think Star began to talk about it. Sarah's asking if she could ask about tone of voice when writing a grant proposal. She says, I feel I need to sound very professional, read robotic, but Kay also mentioned the importance of painting a picture, and when the outcomes of your project are things like healthier people, healthier environment, that seems to need more emotive language. What do you all think?
For me, this is a really tricky one because I think there's a great deal of value in showing the passion and the heart behind your program and your request. And also, the reality is that a lot of the people making decisions about funding are going to be making assumptions about your competence, your program strength, the worthiness of your program based on the language that you use, which is terrible. Like it's an unfortunate side effect of like the white supremacist culture reliance on the written word, right? It's this like a person can only be really smart if they sound really smart in writing. And so it's a line to walk. It's something to be aware of. Like one of the funders that I review for specifically says to us, don't take into account the tone of voice. Don't take into account spelling or grammar errors. That's not what this is about. But I would say the vast majority of funders are not there yet. And so there is a level of professionalism that is really crucial, especially if you don't know your funder, right? Like again, once you have a relationship with a funder, maybe you can relax it a little bit. They know what you do. They know that you know what you're about. But yeah, I think the robot voice is probably pretty helpful. Unfortunately, except for when you're talking about the outcomes, or like there will often be a section that's like, describe your organization's mission, vision, and values. And that's a great place to be like, here's what we're so passionate about. But then when you're getting into the technical, like, how are you going to spend this money? Like, be a robot about how you're going to spend the money. Star,
Yeah.
what would you add to that?
I would just, not much. I think you covered that really well. I think there's a place for both. Um, so, and usually well, I think almost always your resume is asked for, like you put your own professional stamp on it. So yeah, but I think there's usually a place to put your heart out there. And it's important because, there's a reason these folks want to give money. They're passionate about something too. That's why they're giving their time to this. So you can appeal to that. But like Tara mentioned, when you write your budget, know what you're doing and have it really clear. They want to give their money to somebody who's not going to waste it. And that's legitimate too, So I think there's room for both, really. And the other thing you can do once you get going, or even before you get grant money, like you might be able to use samples of students' work or something like that, like attach it and let that be your heart piece. It doesn't have to come directly from you, but who doesn't fall in love with a little kid trying to do something? So yeah, I think there are ways to do this where you really where you really can include both, but you can't do it without the professional bit, I think. People are going to give you money and they're not going to do it without having confidence in you. And it may be unfair, but I mean, they're not going to, most likely, they're not going to meet you. So it's all a paper thing. So they've got to trust what's down there on paper. Yeah. It's not a perfect system, but there's money. So,
I'll also add that a way that I like to think about it is I want to tell a story in my grant proposal that is so compelling that the funder wants to be part of my story. And then
yeah.
in the grant proposal, I can say, like, here's the beginning of the story, here's the middle of the story, there's the end of the story, and the way that you get to be part of this is by giving me your money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I think that that's where, like, helping the funder like feel like they're included, feel like they're part of a journey, that can read professionally but feel very human and inclusive.
And the difference they can make, that they're really the linchpin on this, that they're going to make this happen, that
They
you
get to be
have
the
the
hero in the
skills and
story.
the vision and everything, but you can't do it without them. And so they get to be the hero. Exactly. Yeah. Which is great.
They don't have to know that the actual hero is the adult shepherding the kids around on the field trip.
Eleni, I'm seeing that you have an idea.
Yeah, I wrote grants a very, very long time ago, and I think some of my experience might be relevant. So I found that what works for one organization doesn't work for another. So some organizations will love that story, and sometimes I would, there's like the official grant proposal, and then I might include appendices of things that I wanted to share with them that were outside of their official questionnaire, which some of them have. And so it really is great advice. I think either Star or Tara said this earlier, to see if you can find uh, earlier successful grants to that organization to get a sense of the tone and the style, what moves them. Some will be more story-oriented than others, and that can be really helpful. That's some agencies really want to know how they fit into the story, because the agencies that are giving money, they don't want to only be thought of as a bank. They want to know, well, how can we partner with you to make this a great story? So it can be like really exciting, because then you're making partners, and then they fund you one year, and then subsequent years they partner with you as you apply to somebody else, and they can be one of your recommendations. Maybe someone said that already as well. So I guess what I'm saying in the most concise way is, agencies, in my experience, have different personalities, and some will really resonate with a very touchy-feely, high touch approach, and others just want to know, what's your budget, what's your numbers, what are your deliverables, and then some are kind of in between.
Thank you so much. I really love getting perspectives from folks who have written the grants, and so like Eleni said, really checking to see what they want in terms of those. And yeah, I'm loving all of the tips that we're getting, and also all of the questions that we're getting. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments or resources to share before we close for today? I also wanted to say that I was looking up the dates for the practicums, and I'm not sure if there's any others in 2024 aside from September 7th, but I do know that there's already at least 3 in 2025. So looking those up, I found that, I know I posted them. January 25th, May 31st and October 4th are some of the dates in 2025. And there might be more in either 2024 or in 2025, but those are the ones I know of right now. I'll put that information in again, just to make sure that people have it, as well as Anne Marie's email address. So there's that information again. Any last thoughts or ideas or questions? I'm not seeing any. Again, I want to say thank you, Kay, for coming on and sharing all of your experience and tips and resources with us. Thank you to Star, to Tara, and to Eleni for sharing your experiences as grant writers and also grant readers. Thank you to everybody for participating and for all your questions. And also save the chat. There were some resources put in the chat by Kay, by Tara, by Lydia, by others. So yeah, just save the chat. And I hope that all of you have a beautiful day. Next week, we will probably be doing something about probably something really interactive about creating some icons. The idea will be that we look at vocabulary, like really common words that we have in nature journaling, and think about how we can create icons around that. There can be a bunch of different icons. I know that also it's going to depend on different contexts of maybe our local environments or our cultures, about what icons look like. But the hope is to sort of begin to bridge gaps and to think like eventually what kind of vocabulary can that translate to as well as we begin to outreach with nature journaling in different languages and increase communication with different communities. So hopefully thinking about and creating some icons will be some steps taken in that direction together. And also I'll share a bit about what Sarah's been teaching me about total communication. And then the week after that, for those of you who want to talk more about libraries, we might be sharing some of our personal ones with each other on the final Wednesday of the month. If you've got books, especially educator books, but you know us, we're all about all of the books. If you've got books that you want to come and tell people about and that we can add it to our Nature Journaling Educators Forum Bookshare Joy list, then please do bring some of your library with you. And all of that, I wish you all excellent luck. Ooh, and enjoy the corpse flower at the San Diego Botanical Gardens. That sounds awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody, so much. Take good care. Have a good week.
Thanks, Yvea. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.